So, ich begrüße Sie alle erstmal herzlich hier zu unserer Vortragsreihe über den Ukraine-Krieg, Wege zum Frieden. Ich kann mir nicht verkneifen zu sagen, dass es jetzt 1815 ist. Und das Jahr 1815 war das Jahr des Wiener Kongresses, in dem auch ein großer Krieg zu Ende ging, mit einer Lösung, die dann einige Jahre lang doch gehalten hat. Aber das ist jetzt vielleicht reiner Zufall. Ich möchte Sie, nachdem wir heute den letzten Vortrag haben, noch informieren, dass wir natürlich auch versuchen werden, diese Roundtable-Diskussion in der nächsten Woche durchzuführen. Ich habe eine Zusage von Herrn Warwick und 2 Anfragen, aber noch keine Antworten. Das heißt, ich lade Sie ein, sich bei der Podiumsdiskussion, die online sein wird, nicht mehr hybrid hier, nur online, dazu zu schalten. Ich hoffe, dass sie auch stattfindet. Sollte sie nicht stattfinden, dann verzeihen Sie uns. Vielleicht wird es zu einem späteren Zeitpunkt stattfinden. Ich hoffe aber immer noch, dass wir auch für nächste Woche 2 zusätzliche Referenten haben und eine schöne, interessante Online-Diskussion zustande bringen. So, ich weiß, dass Sie hier auch Untertitel sehen. Ob die Untertitel übersetzt werden, gut übersetzt werden, das können Sie besser beurteilen. Im Augenblick kann ich es nicht beurteilen, aber wir versuchen technisch das möglich zu machen. Denn der Vortrag, den wir jetzt hören werden, wird in englischer Sprache sein. Ich glaube, dass die Übersetzungen aus dem Englischen ins Deutsche genauer sind als das, was ich hier sehe bei den Übersetzungen aus dem Deutschen ins Deutsche. Das ist irgendwie etwas komisch, aber das ist ja auch nicht die Übersetzung. Also, wir hatten bisher ja verschiedenste Perspektiven auf diesen Krieg, Ukraine-Krieg, russisch-ukrainischer Krieg, wie immer Sie den bezeichnen. Und wir hatten vor allem verschiedene Fachperspektiven in dem Vortrag. Wir hatten die Politikwissenschaft, wir hatten das Völkerrecht, wir hatten Sicherheitsaspekte, militärische Aspekte. Und heute kommt jetzt eine andere geografische Sicht hinzu. Wir sind ja eigentlich normalerweise gewohnt, den Ukraine-Krieg im Grunde aus der Perspektive der Europäer, natürlich der Ukraine zuerst, aber der Europäer und der USA zu sehen. Aber es gibt auch andere Großmächte, andere Mächte, die an dem Ganzen natürlich interessiert sind, in der einen oder anderen Form, auch vielleicht davon profitieren oder jedenfalls sich einbringen möchten, auch unter dem Gesichtspunkt Verantwortung, Frieden, ja. Also das ist sehr natürlich von der jeweiligen staatlichen Interessenssicht ausgeprägt. Aber ein Land, das hier immer wieder zitiert wird, gebracht wird, ohne dass wir sehr viel davon im Einzelnen vielleicht immer wissen, ist China. Wir wissen alle, dass die MAGA-Bewegung von Präsident Trump, aber auch manche anderen sogar Neocons, den eigentlichen Gegner in China sehen. Und die sozusagen Ansätze, wie auch immer sie dann nachher sich verwirklichen von Trump in Bezug auf Ukraine, werden auch zum Teil damit erklärt, dass er sozusagen sich befreien möchte von dem Mühlstein Ukraine, zu wessen Lasten auch immer, um Kräfte zu sammeln für die Auseinandersetzung mit China. In welche Richtung auch immer. Das ist sozusagen eine These. Aber natürlich aus der chinesischen Sicht ist es ja auch ein schwieriges Thema, denn man ist einerseits mit Russland verbunden, nicht nur geografisch, sondern auch durch Ökonomie und andere Gesichtspunkte, aber auch durch die Gegenstellung zu den USA in mancher Hinsicht. Also die chinesische Sicht auf den Ukraine-Krieg ist wichtig. Man hat immer hier, wenn ich den Eindruck sozusagen mitteile, den ich selber habe, das Gefühl, es wird eigentlich kaum berichtet, was China da macht. Man sozusagen hat den Eindruck, China ist auch da und macht zwar irgendwas, aber eigentlich nicht so sozusagen relevant in der ganzen Geschichte. Ist das richtig? Herr Richter hat letzte Woche ja schon angedeutet, dass es da auch chinesische Initiativen gibt. China Großmacht, Weltmacht, die sozusagen ökonomisch enorm bedeutsam ist, auch natürlich vom Iran Öl bezieht. Also insofern sehen wir die Verbindung auch zu dem Nahostkrieg oder Irankrieg wieder. Und es ist schon, glaube ich, interessant. Ich bin froh, dass es gelungen ist, mit Frau Dr. Jiagu Richter jemanden auch in diese Vorlesung einladen zu können, der oder die hier also sehr viel, glaube ich, beitragen kann. And I'm now switching to English because I think it's good to have this kind of direct connection. She speaks German perfectly well, but I think for having the smooth transfer to Dr. Richter's presentation, it's good to say a few words about her in English. She is born Chinese. She's now German. One of those cases like my own, let's say, background where we have, let's say, families with roots in several countries. And it's interesting also to see a little bit her CV because it shows why she was invited to give her speech here. She got a legal education in Shanghai at a very renowned university, then specialized to become a lawyer, and then moved in the 1980s to start a career in the Chinese diplomatic service. And she served several years, I think 10 or 15 or so, in the UN delegation of China in Geneva. And she participated in this function in many negotiations about disarmament. So the issue which is now on the stage also, as was said last week, the security issues play maybe the leading role in many of those discussions. That's an area which she has seen from inside, from Chinese diplomacy. And then at some moment, for, I understand, personal reasons, she decided to leave that. And then she became more or less active in many fields in the academic world, giving presentations, teaching in several contexts, also in Vienna, where we have also an UN, let's say, place. And for several reasons, we got to know each other because she was in contact also with the China Center of our university and gave there a very interesting, splendid speech on the position of China on the South China Sea. So it's a public international topic which she described from the Chinese perspective, but also from the maybe broader legal public international law perspective. So that's one area, but in this context, of course, this double experience of understanding the Chinese approach to public international law, the Chinese approach to diplomacy, all in this context with a focus on Ukraine, is exactly what we, let's say, have hope for. And I'm very glad that Dr. Jiagu Richter is here, and I'll give her the floor. Please, you have the floor, Jiagu.
Thank you very much, Professor Tonk and dear Alexander. And I'm happy to be invited to give one of these series lectures on the Ukraine issue. So my topic today is China's perspective on the war and on the global security architecture. That means what is the Chinese view for the future? What is the best approach? Oh, yeah. So I will talk about these questions, the points. The first is the Chinese perspective of the war. Yeah. And then in that issue, I will also talk about which much doubted expression of Sino-Russian friendship or friendliness without ceiling, or whether China deliver weapons to Russia. And then the second point is the Chinese position paper. It is, I think in the Western media, maybe it is never talked about. It's only in the diplomatic circle. And then what is the responses of different countries to the Chinese initiative? And I will also talk about Chinese efforts for mediation, which is even less known here in the West. And they have shuttle diplomacy, they have sent a special representative for several visits to many countries. So then I will turn to what is the Chinese preferred approach for this issue. Here I will talk about a little bit of history about how China becomes somebody who supports the multilateralism. What is the historical development, and what is the present landscape of the multilateral world, where China stands, and then the Chinese vision for the multilateral security architecture. So the first is the Chinese position on this war. second day after war broke up, the foreign minister of China has a telephone calls with several with the with the British foreign secretary, with the high representative for foreign affairs of EU, and also with the advisor to the French president. Yeah, at these telephone calls, he has expounded the Chinese basic positions, which can be summarized in his 5 points. The first is the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries should be respected and safeguarded. So that is already very clear. It is a criticism of the Russian position, of the Russian launch of the war. That means the territorial integrity of Ukraine should not be invaded, should not be violated, and the sovereignty should be protected. And the second point is advocating for a common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security concept. And also, he talked about NATO's eastward expansion for several times, and it is the context of the whole issue. And also, the Russians' legitimate security concerns should be taken into account. That means he spoke of both sides. So it's really try to be neutral, to be in the middle. So, and then there are several other points that is, one should exercise restraint to prevent the further deterioration, to prevent the large scale of humanitarian crisis. And the peaceful resolution should be promoted. There should be direct dialogue and negotiations. And also, in these efforts to achieve a resolution, China support the role of UN, but not in the Security Council adopt a resolution and have only condemnation and only sanctions. So Chinese position on sanctions is also a traditional one. It is a long-term, they do not support, especially the sanctions without the authorization of the UN Security Council. They call it unilateral sanctions, which in their view, it will deteriorate the situation. It will not help for the solution of the issue. So, and then this position is further developed when President Xi Jinping had a video conference with President Macron from France and then with Scholz from Germany. He expressed the similar ideas on what Foreign Minister Wang Yi said. So then it put into 4 points. The first is first is the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries. So that is a Chinese traditional position ever since the founding of the People's Republic. So that is also the most important principle in the Charter of UN in the Chinese eyes. Of course, there are also other important principles, but this one is very dear to the Chinese heart. So it is a continued position. Here, it is a clear support for the Ukrainians. And then it is the purpose and principles of UN Charter should be observed. That means also the other principles and points. And legitimate security concern of all countries. Here, it means that the historical reasons and ground for the conflict between Russia and Ukraine should be taken as a framework, as a background for this conflict and for this war. So the legitimate security concerns of Russia should be taken into consideration. That is always the two sides which Chinese emphasized. And then to support all efforts conducive to the peaceful resolution of the crisis. Well, why China takes such a position, we have to see China's relation with both Ukraine and with Russia. So with Ukraine, actually, these two countries, China and Ukraine, always kept a good bilateral relationship ever since the collapse of Soviet Union and independence of Ukraine. So they started a diplomatic relationship in 1992, and ever since the relationship is good. So one very outstanding issue is that the Chinese first aircraft carrier, it was from Ukraine. I mean, the Ukraine got it from Soviet Union, and it is not finished one, and they just want to get rid of it and to sell it. So the Chinese bought it, and now China has the second one already built by itself. But the first one was actually it took only the framework of the Ukraine, this submarine carrier. No, I mean aircraft carrier. So after war broke out, there was a long pause for the bilateral consultations. Yeah, we know that Ukraine has to concentrate on dealing with the situation at home, and also had close contact and consultation with the NATO countries, with the United States. And so there's not so much going on between them, but then it resumed. After the resumption of the political consultations for the Ukraine side, they mainly asked China not to support weapons to Russia and to work on Koreans not to participate, and also urged China to participate in their initiated global peace summit in Switzerland, which China did not participate. And the trade relationship between the two countries are growing. In 2019, China became the largest trade partner of Ukraine, even after the war goes on, even in 1924. So if we talk about the relation with Russia, I think maybe everybody has the knowledge that there used to be alliance in the Cold War time. I mean, in the first part of the Cold War time, and when the new China People's Republic established on the 1st of October 1949, the second day, Soviet Union recognized has diplomatic recognition, while all the West countries refused to do that only in the 70s. Yeah, so it's more than 20 years. And China was locked out of the United Nations, while the old government Republic of China, who moved to Taiwan, to the tiny island, which cannot represent the whole country, but they are still in the UN and took the seat. So China has to just rely on the Eastern Bloc. But then in the late 50s and especially in the 60s, the relationship between the two became very bad, the so-called split, Sino-Soviet split. And even in 1969, there was a short and a small border war between the two countries. And at that time, China called the Soviet revisionist. That was even the biggest enemy, bigger than the two bigger enemies. One is Soviet Union, one is the United States. So it was so bad. Only after the end of the Cold War and in 1980s, and the relationship started to be changed, to be ameliorated, and then it becomes to be a normal relationship between the two big neighbors. Yeah. So for the moment, I could say that nobody of the both sides want to have a kind of alliance, especially kind of military alliance like NATO. So, but friendly relationship and friendly neighbors, and also some kind of strategic partners. So there is an expression of Sino-Soviet friendship without ceiling, which in the Western media talked a lot about. And how did this come out? It doesn't seem fit in the what I described as a general framework for the two countries' relationship. So it was the first appearance was in 2021. It was when the deputy ministers of two countries have a video conference. At that time, it was Corona time. They cannot meet, and they have a video conference. And the deputy foreign minister from China, Le Yucheng, I know him personally. He was responsible for the affairs of Eastern European affairs, and he had the expression that there's no limit to China-Russia friendliness, not friendship, and no forbidden zone for cooperation, and no upper limit for mutual trust. That's his expression. So it's a kind of a creation of his expression. Of course, it is under the general framework of the pressure from United States for China, because China certainly found itself not very suddenly, with some years, that China is the first #1 rivalry of the United States, which China doesn't want and feel also not fit for that, but it is that way. So under this pressure, and also the pressure from the United States to Russia, well, these two had some kind of strategic partnership in need. So actually this kind of expression, as I said, is from him, and then it was taken once in the official statement. That is in the joint statement when in 2022, that was when the President Xi Jinping had expressed that, so the new type of China-Russia state-to-state relationship transit the military and the political alliance mode of Cold War era. That they still say that, and there's no end to the friendliness between the two countries, no forbidden area for cooperation. So soon the war broke out. After the war broke out, of course, this expression was immediately taken by the Western media, and said that even China supported Russia in launching the war. And this kind of expression actually gradually faded. And then next time when the two president meets, and the expression in the common joint statement is already changed. So it changed back to the usual and to the normal way, which is non-aligned, non-confrontational, and not directed against third party. So, and later, with mutual visit of Putin to China and Xi Jinping to Russia in 2023, 24, and 25, it is always stays with this statement for the description of the bilateral relationship. And facing the criticism of the Western media and not just media, the Western or diplomacy, diplomats and politicians of Chinese support for Russian launching the war. And they have, of course, the Chinese said they did not support, and they did not know that. And when in the February the 4th, when Putin visited China on the Summer Olympics, and that's the time when this kind of expression was given in an official statement. And that is not too many days before the war, so that's why people doubted that maybe they have got the tacit support of China, the informed Chinese, but actually not, because we can see it from the Chinese positions. And then the expression of the bilateral relationship goes back to the non-aligned. So it is a kind of relation of non-aligned, non-confrontational, and not directed at the third country. So the best explanation actually of this is from the former Chinese ambassador to EU, Ambassador Fu Cong. and he's now ambassador to UN. He said the so-called no end, no limit, it is just a rhetoric. It's just an expression. So if people know the Chinese language, they might know that some people likes to express beautifully the words, but it is meant for rhetorically, not have a concrete meaning behind it. And then he explained that, of course, there is always a limit to the friendship, and it is the interest of his own country. And then also why some Western media also said China supported war, because they said China did not condemn Russia for starting the war. So the Chinese explanation is that they are not agreeable with the launching of the war, but the evolution of this issue has a very complex historical context. It is the NATO repeated eastward expansion, and also the hostile policies of Ukraine, supported by US and by some Western countries, have threatened the Russians' security. So also, as I explained, facing the containment policy of United States against China and a very tight encirclement, and the Chinese support for the Russian legitimate security concern is not just a principal position, but also an outcry for itself. So that means all the legitimate concerns, security concerns of all countries should be addressed. Yeah, one could not just build bloc politics and then neglect the other people's security concerns. So, and China also did not participate in the sanctions because of their positional position. They think the principal position, they think the sanctions is not a way out. And frankly speaking, is also not very successful. It always hurts. It's a double sword. It hurts both sides, and Europeans hurt as much, maybe even more, as the Russians. So, and has repeatedly denied any allegation that they have delivered weapons. And the latest accusation is from Zelensky, that actually the first time from him. And of course, it has also background whenever there's with the battlefield situation, and also with the American support when it's leaking, then they try to, because some country knows if they criticize China, it can also gain some points from the United States. So, but the second day, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman had already has responded to that, and clearly made that China has never provided lethal weapons to any party, also not to Ukraine. Yeah. So China did not want to add oil to the fire. Yeah. So and with the trade of China and Russia, that is very natural. If Russia faces with, so many sanctions and heavy sanctions from the European countries and European Union, and also from United States, it can only change to the global source and China for trade. Yeah. And China is a major neighbor of Russia, and with 4,300 kilometers long land border, and also some 4,000 kilometer water border. So if China did not support the idea of as the European countries on the wall, of course they would retain their normal economic and trade exchanges. So I think the volume is increased because Russia has no other trading partners. And if they turn to China, and China did not reject. So, but that is not their position on the war, and also no weapon delivery. So 2 years after the war started in 2023, China has issued a position paper on the war, and with 12 points. As I saw this paper, as it was just issued, I applauded so much. I think, oh, now it is finally there's somebody talk about both sides and try to build a bridge. So the 12-point position paper is, again, the first is respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. Yeah. And then the security concerns of all countries, of course, including Russia, and dialogue, direct dialogue between to de-escalate the situation and to leads to the ceasefire and the peace agreement. And start the peace negotiations. Yeah, there are a lot. One important one is to reduce strategic risk, preventing the use of atomic, biological, and chemical weapons. We call ABC weapons, also called weapons of mass destruction. That is very welcome by all. And also it talks about stop unilateral sanctions because it doesn't work to de-escalate. It will just escalate the tension between the two sides. And yeah, and also to talk about promote post-war construction. It is a very comprehensive, I should say, but not that detailed. How to change war, criminals of war, and how to, not without details. And what is the response to this Chinese position paper? For Russia, they appreciated China's desire to contribute to the resolution, although they did not like some of it, especially the first point, which implied criticism of Russia. But I think the Russians would understand. They would not expect China to support them wholeheartedly because it is Chinese principled position, and it is, in Chinese eyes, it is wrong to start this war. And for Ukraine, Zelensky had expressed some agreement to some part, but it said, oh, it needs further discussion. But other people in Ukraine, they have more negative positions, negative attitudes towards that. They say it is just to freeze the conflict, but it's not solve the problem. And the foreign minister, Kuleba, had said, oh, to ask for lifting the sanctions on Russia is not acceptable. It is preferred by the Russians. Yeah. But they said that it is an interesting paper and should be carefully studied. So, of course, and then by the UN is very welcomed and the global South. But then for US, at that time, it was still Biden administration, and Biden said it is not appropriate to let China mediate in this conflict. Yeah. For the NATO Secretary General at that time is still Stoltenberg. He said China did not condemn Russia, so they don't have credibility as a mediator. And the EU, von der Leyen, said China has taken side on the Russian side. And Germany, also the Chancellor Scholz has appreciated China on the point of these ABC weapons, but the Steinmeier is, they doubted, and China is an honest mediator. And Macron has also somewhat positive sign. Generally speaking, it was welcomed by the Global South and UN. It was accepted to some extent by both the conflicting parties, but by US totally reject Chinese play any role, and by NATO and Western Europeans, well, they don't like it. And so this 12-point position paper was just put aside, even not known by the European and population. And then in 2024, China and Brazil had drafted a 6-point common understanding on this war. So the first point is that one should not, there should be no spillover of the battlefield. The battlefield should not be spilled over, and no escalation of the war, and no action of adding fuel to the fire. That actually is against the weapon delivery further and further to Ukraine. So just to cool down the tension, not to make the tension even more. And then there should be dialogue and negotiations and humanitarian assistance, and also the nuclear war, or it's still again on ABC wars. It's opposed the use of ABC weapons and opposed to attack on nuclear power plants. There are several times that this nuclear power plant in Ukraine, which is under the control of Russia, were attacked, and that was very dangerous. We know Chernobyl, so that is, if there's something happened, it's not just for Ukraine, it is for the whole Europe, and even further. And also, this common understanding oppose the division of the world into blocks. So this common understanding, and then China worked further on it. So, which is what is also not known maybe to the European audience, is that China did make some efforts for mediation, for ending the war. The former Deputy Foreign Minister Li Hui, he was a Deputy Foreign Minister for Eastern European Affairs, which is the predecessor of this Le Yucheng. He was appointed special representative for this conflict. So he has conducted 4 rounds of shuttle diplomacy. The first round was in, how much time do I have? I still have, the first round was in May 2023. So he visited first Ukraine, and then Poland, France, Germany, EU, and Russia. But no result at all, because at that time, the positions from 2 parts are so far apart. And Europeans, Western Europeans, and NATO countries, not all, are talking about defeat of Russia. And so, and the Russians also want to go on with that to achieve their, as they said, the military operation, the goals of the military operation. So there's no hope. But he tried to visit these countries to get the Chinese ideas to pass these messages to them. And then the second round of the shuttle diplomacy was a start from Moscow, and then EU, Poland, Ukraine, Germany, and France. So, and at that time, the Ukrainians was preparing for the peace conference, a peace summit they call. And the Chinese had made it clear, a peace conference, if without involving the both sides of conflicting party, it will be no effect. It will lead to nowhere for the peace plans. And we do not want to have a conference of criticism, of more sanctions. That is not a way out. So also China rejected to participate because of that, because Russia was not invited to participate. That's not the peace conference for the Chinese view. And then he conducted a third round of shuttle diplomacy in May 2024. He visited mainly the third world countries, the global south, and mentioned about these three principles to cool down the tension. Yeah, so no spillover and no escalation and no adding fuel. Yeah, it's actually not only for the two sides, but also for the others. Yeah. And then these 3 points also goes into the common understanding of the China and Brazil is paper. The fourth round was carried out in July 2024, and Mr. Li Hui, he visited Brazil, South Africa, Indonesia, and to win the support for this 6-point common understanding of Brazil and China. So to consolidate actually this understanding, to try to form a third world or a global south position on this issue, or for the a way out proposal. And then further, the Chinese go to the UN General Assembly. And in the General Assembly in September 2024, and under the chairmanship of China and Brazil, 17 countries from Global South formed a group. It's called Front for Peace on Ukraine crisis. And and they announced that this is an open platform. Anybody is welcomed to join in this and to try in efforts to achieve peace. And it emphasized on the UN to bring together more countries, especially global south countries, yeah, and to send more objective and balanced views, voices, accumulate conditions, and create an atmosphere for a ceasefire, and finally to peace talks. So in the General Assembly in September 2024, 110 countries support China, Brazil, this 6-point common understanding. But the Ukraine diplomats, they have distributed a document in New York and claiming that this is in favor of Russia. So I think in Ukraine, the voices are also different. Sometimes the highest level of leadership may not be the same as the others. And further, after United States, after Trump came into office in January this year, and the US changed 180 degrees of their positions, and then in 2025 in Munich Security Conference, the Foreign Minister Wang Yi again said that the end point of any conflict is the negotiation table. So one should go to the negotiation table as soon as possible, as early as possible. And of course, he welcomed the peace talks, the consensus reached by US and Russia, yeah, and encouraged all parties, all stakeholders to participate. We know that is a big change, yeah, of US position and Western Europeans. So they have just changed sides. And also, the Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Munich also mentioned it is necessary for Europe to play a role. The Europeans feel that, the Americans, Trump just talked with Putin and we are pushed aside. And here the Chinese feel that it is a European issue. I mean, first and foremost, it is a European issue. Of course, it is also a world issue, I mean, this crisis. So it is necessary, it is important for Europe to play a role so that there will be a balanced, effective, and sustainable security framework for all the European countries, and then there's peace and stability in Europe. So China promote a European role in the negotiation, not just to so-called superpowers talk and can solve everything. So what is Chinese preferred approach to the solution of this issue? I think every time we can see from their position paper, from the common understanding of Brazil and China, every time they emphasize on the sovereignty and in territorial integrity. So that of course should be addressed. In which way, that also is a detailed issue. And the Chinese think also that the solution, any sustainable solution must address the security concern of all countries, because the whole thing, the Chinese see the root causes of this problem, not of this crisis, of this war, is not just a one-side imperial ambition, but also it is a very complicated security issue of Europe, and also, if we say, of Eastern Europe, or between Russia and Ukraine. And to put it wider, is also Ukraine would not have such a policy for years if it is not supported by US and by European countries at that time was still not. First, it's agitated by US. So there should be a sound security architecture in Europe and further in the world. And then this architecture should be anchored, should be attained through the pillar role, the central role of UN. So China emphasized a lot the UN as a multilateral, as a forum, as a platform for multilateralism, as a central piece, a central pillar for the world peace. And I remember for the several years ago, and the Western, I mean, up to now also, people still talk about rule of order, of course not for Trump now, but this rule of order, the Chinese foreign minister in United Nations General Assembly in 2021 has made it very clear. It used to be on different articles, but here in UN, it said that there's only one international system, that is with UN at its core. There's only one international order that is underpinned by international law. So, and there's only one set of rules, which is based on the purpose and principles of UN Charter. So that, in contrast to what the some Western countries talk about the rule of order. Rule of order is not any rules, and it's not rule written by a group of countries, but it should be by UN, by all countries. And that was even put in the Chinese law in 2023. There's a law on foreign relations, and the Article 19 reads that the People's Republic of China upholds the international system with the United Nations at its core, the international order underpinned by international law, and the fundamental norms governing international relations based on the purpose and principles of the Charter of the United Nations. So that is the Chinese understanding for the security issues in the world. So why China promote UN so much? Is China always that way? Which is not. We know that in 1949, when the People's Republic was established, it was out of UN. So for more than 20 years, it stays outside this system. It can only have some contact with the Eastern European countries, with Soviet Union. So at that time, to this multilateral body and system, the positions or attitude of China is a kind of a system transforming. So they think UN should be transformed. It doesn't support the third world country, and it is no use for really solving the problem. And then in 1971, China was accepted to replace Taiwan into the UN, and Taiwan was driven out. And so from then to the 1978 is the reform and opening. So China, although it is in the UN, but it is still did not take it as a real, did not embrace multilateralism, let's say this way. So it always want to reform the system. Yeah, they think the system is only a forum to deliver a speech, to state your position, yeah, but it doesn't play a real role. But after 1978, it started to change. It was just the time, then later the end of the Cold War, the global issues grow exponentially, yeah, in numbers and in complexity. There are so many things like multilateral issues came out and needs multilateral solution. So that creates a need for multilateralism, yeah, and a global solution. And China in this process gained a lot of positive experiences, yeah, and it has its multilateralism developed at the same time with the globalization, yeah. So, and China found out that multilateralism is the best way for Chinese interest. Yeah, it wants to be accepted as a big power, but without bloc confrontation. So UN is the best place. Yeah, and then China gradually become a supporter, yeah, of the system. So and become even the central supporting force for the UN and also other multilateral international organizations. So from system transforming to system reforming to system maintaining, and then finally to system supporting this change of attitude in the last decades. So here I want to show an example how Chinese attitude change. It is the budget sharing of different countries. In UN, we know it is a big organization and has a lot of projects and programs and conferences, and it needs a big budget. And who pays for that? So member states. And they have a kind of assessment and the scales of payment. So China, when it joined, it has 4%. Oh, sorry. It pays 4%. It was only inherited from the old Republic of China. And then even increased somewhat, yeah, a little bit. Although according to the standard, which is mainly, it's called the payment of ability. So how much you are able to pay, you pay it. And it is mainly based on the per capita GDP. And China had a very low GDP at that time, but it still paid that much. And then starting from the reform and opening door, it has adopted the attitude of true to fact. So early on, they do not want to pay less because they want to keep faith. So faith is the most important. But then it changed into the real interest is the most important. And then it's take the UN's standard, yeah, because the UN officers used to say, you don't have to pay that much. That is not your standard. And the Chinese said, no, we are a big country, we will pay that much. Although the back home, the population have a very poor standard of life. But then as the Chinese economy grows and the GDP grows tremendously, and then from 2000 is almost 1%. And from 2000, it increased like rocket. You see, from 2000 to 2025 for now, it is 20%. So it's 20 times. And here last year, the Fifth Committee of United Nations General Assembly, every 3 years will adjust again which country will pay how much. And in last year, in the General Assembly, I thought, oh, it might increase again. It will not be 15%, but I did not expect it could now go above 20%. Now China is number 2, and the difference between the US is only 1 point something, less than 2%. And the biggest is still US. US used to be 25, and then it asked to reduce to 25. And China is much more than Germany, is more than 3, the next 3 put together, almost. So you can see that how much support China gave to UN, and UN relies on China. That is the change of United States and China in their payment or contribution to the UN. So US stays here. So 2003, they changed from 25 to 22%. Then it stays this way. And China grows, and now it's very close. It could be soon will be the same or even more. And it's another point, the US have a big arrears, that means delay of payment. When US delays payment, the United Nations have big financial problems, sometimes cannot pay the salaries of the employees. And UN has an article saying that if a country delays or did not pay its contribution for 2 years, that means the sum put together is amount to 2 years, it will stop its voting right in the General Assembly. But every time US is the accumulated almost up to 2 years, they will pay the delays. And for the moment, it's still not. But there are some countries which have been stopped for the voting. They are so small countries. We know that. You see this. No. Oh, why I cannot go back? So the top 10 contributors to the UN budget already more than 74%. The other countries are sometimes only a token, but this token is also important for the significance for. And for peacekeeping operations is another calculation, and the financial contributions, the biggest is US, the second is also China. So, but the personnel's contribution to UN peacekeeping among the P5, China is much more than the others. And if we want to see how this change for the Chinese ranking in the peacekeeping personnels, we can see from the beginning of the 21st century and increased now. So it's now somehow keep in this kind of position, which is number 9 or 10. And the personnel in figures is also, here the highest is, there might be some actions, but now it keeps to close to 2,000. It's also a big increase from the beginning of the century. And there are also other multilateral initiatives to show that Chinese embrace the multilateralism. Shanghai Cooperation Organization which you might have heard, that started from the China with Russia and the Central Asian countries, neighboring countries. Yeah, firstly, it was a demarcation efforts for the China-Soviet Union border and the China-Central Asian country border, which extends to 7,800 kilometers. Yeah, now only with Russia is already 4,300 kilometers. And now it's all settled. Yeah. It's all settled. And this organization focused on the common problem of Central Asia and China and the Chinese Western borders. That is terrorism, religious extremist, yeah, and separatist. So these three against the three is the common goal of the member states of this organization. So this organization has also extended. It has for many years did not extend. Only these 6 countries, China, Russia, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan, and finally Uzbekistan. So these 6 countries. But now it's added India, Pakistan, and Iran. It was under pressure for expansion for many years. They asked to come in, and finally it extended with also some observer states. And the other initiative is Belt and Road. So initiative. In the beginning, it was said Belt and Road strategy, but then it was challenged and criticized a lot, and say the Chinese ambition to extend their influence to Europe. So then they changed the word into initiative. So it's win-win, and everybody want to join. It's just mainly based on infrastructure and trade. And it's also joined by many countries. And the last one is there's still this Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, which, according to some experts, is a very successful. So, similar to World Bank, the role and categories in the World Bank, but it's more successful than Asian Bank, which is under Japanese control, or dominance. And this bank, Shanghai Cooperation Organization and AIIB is based in China, yeah. And then the BRICS. So Brazilian, Russian, India, China, South Africa, yeah. And now it is already expanded to 11 countries, yeah, in the last year. So to include Saudi Arabia, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, Ethiopia, Indonesia, and Iran. So with the main approach for supporting United Nations and also other multilateral institutions, yeah, could China achieve a kind of a multilateral world? No, you can see that all this does not include Western countries. Yeah. So for multilateralism, we go to this first. Oh, no. Sorry. Yeah, the China has a multilateral security architecture, the ideas for that. Yeah. Between 2021 and 23, China has introduced 3 global initiatives. One is Global Development Initiative, one is Global Security Initiative, and the other is Global Civilization Initiative. So this Global Security Initiative relates to our topic today. So it was issued in March 2023. And so it is still talk about balanced, sustainable security architecture. And the security is indivisible. That means you cannot divide, and here you have peace and there you have war. No, it doesn't work. It influenced one another. And then opposed to building the national security on the basis of insecurity of others. Yeah. So that is the main idea of this Chinese security initiative. Yeah. Well, it talks about common, comprehensive, and cooperative and sustainable security. Yeah. And it's based on the respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of countries, and also with the UN as UN Charter as the cornerstone, and taking security concerns of all countries, yeah, and solve problem peacefully through dialogue, and also the security in all the fields, yeah, including the AI, including the electronic. So that is considered actually to be global public goods promoted by China, because for multilateralism, you need the support of big countries with financial support. You need also the public goods. So in the beginning years of Chinese in the UN, it always have people describe it as have free ride. So if others do something, create something, we just join and we get the benefit from it. But if everybody does that, especially big countries does that, the multilateralism cannot go on. So it needs the public product. Yeah, it needs the big countries to provide this kind of product. Yeah, that is the Chinese public product. Yeah. And China has also made other efforts in UN to promote multilateralism. Yeah, whenever, in Security Council, the 5 countries have take roles in reciting the meetings. And so when China become the chairmanship and presidency of Security Council, they always promote to have discussions on strengthening multilateralism, strengthening the role of UN. So in 2018, in 2025, there were always this kind of meetings held under the Chinese presidency. Yeah. So the UN Secretary General Guterres, he has appreciated highly the Chinese support for multilateralism and for UN. And recently, in June this year, he has said that China is a key pillar in defending multilateralism and in promoting global sustainable development. So UN appreciates a lot. And not just because of money, Chinese is more than 1/5 of the budget, and also because of its support, its promotion in all the field. But for multilateralism, well, this is a word, actually, it is a concept starting in the 1970s. And yeah, actually the main theory are from American academia. So in the Robert Cohenhan and Joseph Nye, they have their books about multilateralism. So they brought out this concept in 1977. And then John Ruggie, he used to be, he's a professor in maybe Harvard or which university, but then he came the Deputy Secretary General of United Nations, and then went back to the academia again. He has given definition of institutional multilateralism in 1993, and with 3 very distinguished characteristics. One is indivisibility, like peace cannot be divided. Yeah, here peace, there war. And no discrimination for all the participants. And then it's diffuse reciprocity. It's not like bilateral diplomacy that you get tit for tat, and you get something like a deal, you get something done and pay something, so you get it repaid immediately, which Trump likes so much, the deal. And then multilateralism is with commonly accepted principles, with equal participation, and also some voluntary submission of sovereignty, of some degree of sovereignty. Like in EU, I would take it as a regional multilateralism, and it asks for more submission of sovereignty, which also faced with confrontation, also opposition. But the multilateralism, especially global, if you want it to be effective, it needs the big power support. Simply, is the financial issue is the biggest issue. If without US, without China, without big country support, they cannot run. It doesn't work. And for US, this year when Trump came into office, the second day he announced withdrawal from WHO. So this organization will meet with great difficulty. And with UNESCO, it's already for 6 years, US was out of it. And then, it has to be others to take over this burden. But I don't think if US is out and China can take over all and pay 40%, that's not possible. And it will be burdened, and the program will be cut, and the framework will be reduced. Is the time already? Okay, good. So now I go to almost the last. I would call it now a fragmented multilateralism, because the confrontation of bloc building is there. So what is feasible for Chinese approach the Ukraine and Russian war? I think the multilateralism is not the choice of present administration of the United States, and also US and the West reject the Chinese play a bigger role, and also lack of acceptance from Ukraine, but also that could change. It depends on the Ukraine's dependence on the Western US. And also, of course, it lack of implementation ideas and mechanism. If it is accepted, it should go to details. So as I see it, as a mediator for China, is a very low possibility. Although China has diplomatic source, but there's a trust deficit, and also they have lack of discourse power. The discourse power is in the hand of the Europeans, of the West, including US. And as a carrier for peace plan, there's a very low possibility for China. But as a guarantor, if there's something under the UN and with P5, then China could have some possibility as a guarantor. But as a participant in the post-war constructor, it's a high possibility for China. So I end my presentation.